Origins. The champagne glass trembled slightly in Sophia Blackwood's hand as camera flashes illuminated the grand ballroom of the Westfield Tower. Another ribbon-cutting ceremony, another chance for her husband to stand in the spotlight while she remained in the carefully arranged shadows. "Mrs. Westfield, just one more with your husband, please," called a photographer, motioning her forward like an afterthought. Victor Westfield's arms snaked around her waist, his fingers digging possessively into her hip as he pulled her close. His cologne, expensive and overwhelming, seemed to suffocate her as he whispered, "Smile, darling. You look miserable." So she smiled. She had perfected that smile over 7 years of marriage, bright enough to avoid questions, reserved enough to keep from outshining the man who had once promised to be her partner rather than her owner. "That's my girl," Victor murmured before immediately releasing her to shake hands with the mayor. Sophia drifted toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline, the city lights blurring slightly as she blinked back tears she refused to shed. 10 years ago, she had been pursuing her master's degree in business analytics with dreams of launching her own financial technology platform. Then she met Victor at a university fundraiser, charming, ambitious Victor who had seemed genuinely fascinated by her ideas. "Mrs. Westfield?" Sophia turned to find Dominic Walsh, Victor's chief financial officer, regarding her with that particular mix of pity and politeness she had grown accustomed to from Victor's executives. "The speech will begin soon," he said. Victor asked that. "You be seated at the family table." Family table. The irony wasn't lost on her. There was no family, just Victor and his ambitions. The children they had once discussed became perpetually delayed as Victor insisted the timing wasn't right for his career. Her own career had been subtly dismantled with gentle suggestions that "my wife doesn't need to work, and wouldn't you rather focus on our home?" "Of course," Sophia replied, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you, Dominic." As she made her way across the ballroom, conversations hushed momentarily as people noticed her passing. She was beautiful in her midnight blue gown, her dark hair swept into an elegant updo that highlighted her delicate features. But beauty had become another cage. "Victor's lovely wife," they called her, as though being lovely was her sole contribution to existence. At the table, she took her designated seat, perfectly positioned for cameras to capture her adoring gaze, when Victor announced Westfield Enterprises' expansion into Europe. The same Europe where she had once dreamed of studying, before Victor had convinced her that supporting his dreams was more important. Her phone buzzed in her clutch, a text from her father's lawyer. "The paperwork is complete. Your inheritance has been transferred as requested. Are you certain about this, Sophia?" Her fingers hovered over the screen. The modest sum her father had left her upon his death last month, the only money Victor didn't control, now sat in an account under her maiden name. Victor had laughed when he heard the amount, calling it pocket change. To him, perhaps, but to Sophia it represented something far more valuable, a choice. The lights dimmed as Victor took the stage, his confident voice filling the room as he spoke of vision and legacy. Sophia watched him, seeing not the man she had married, but the stranger he had become, or perhaps always was. The man who had gradually isolated her from friends and family, who controlled their finances with an iron grip, who had reduced her dreams to decorative elements in his narrative. She typed a single word in response to the lawyer. "Yes," as applause erupted around her. Sophia took a sip of champagne. Tomorrow would change everything. Tonight, she would play her part one final time. What she didn't know then was just how completely she would transform. From the silent wife in the shadows to a force that would one day make Victor Westfield tremble. Betrayal. The first hints of dawn filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Westfield penthouse as Sophia arranged the fresh-cut peonies in a crystal vase. Victor preferred the apartment immaculate when he returned from his business trips. everything in its proper place, including her. Her phone chimed with a message from Imani, her former college roommate and one of the few friends Victor hadn't managed to completely exile from her life. Flight landed, still on for coffee. At 11? Sophia glanced at the grandfather clock in the hallway. 3 hours until she would meet Imani at their favorite cafe. 2 hours until Victor was scheduled to return from his emergency meetings in Chicago. She typed back a quick confirmation. The sound of the elevator arriving made her freeze. Keys jangled, and the front door swung open. "Victor?" Sophia called out, surprised. "You're back early." No response. She moved toward the entryway, bare feet silent against the marble floor. The sight that greeted her wasn't her husband alone, but Victor entwined with Camilla Thornton, his executive assistant. Camilla's blouse was partially unbuttoned, Victor's tie askew, both of them flushed and unaware of her presence. Sophia stood motionless, watching as Victor pressed Camilla against the wall, murmuring something that made the woman giggle. The sound finally alerted them to her presence. Victor jerked away, his expression shifting from shock to something calculated in seconds. "Sophia, you're supposed to be at your yoga class, not, 'I'm sorry.'" Not even surprise, just annoyance at her deviation from schedule. "Clearly," Sophia replied, her voice unnaturally calm even to her own ears. Camilla at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, hastily buttoning her blouse. "I should go," she mumbled. "No need," Sophia said. "This is apparently your home more than mine." Victor's face hardened. "Don't be dramatic, Sophia. Camilla and I were working late and needed to pick up some documents before heading to the office." "At 8 a.m.? From our bedroom?" Sophia's laugh sounded foreign to her own ears. "How convenient that your Chicago emergency required you to be in our bed." Victor stepped toward her, lowering his voice to that patronizing tone he used when he thought she was being unreasonable. "We should discuss this privately. Camilla, wait in the car." After Camilla scurried out, Victor's demeanor changed instantly. "This isn't what you think." "It's exactly what I think," Sophia replied. "The question is, how long?" "Does it matter?" Victor moved to the bar cart, pouring himself a bourbon despite the early hour. "We have an arrangement, Sophia. You enjoy the lifestyle I provide, and I get to do what I want. It's how these marriages work." "Our arrangement?" Sophia echoed. "I wasn't aware I had agreed to this arrangement." Victor sighed, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Don't act naive. You've known who I am from the beginning. And let's be honest, what would you do without me? Go back to your little app ideas? Please." He drained his glass. "I have a board meeting at 9. We'll discuss this later. I suggest you calm down and remember everything you stand to lose." As he disappeared into their bedroom to change, Sophia remained rooted to the spot, a strange clarity washing over her. This moment, his casual cruelty, his absolute certainty in her dependence, crystallized everything she had been feeling for years. By the time Victor emerged in a fresh suit, Sophia had moved to her desk, calmly writing something on a notepad. "I'm leaving for the office," he announced. "Have dinner ready at 8. The Hendersons are coming over, and I need you to be presentable. We'll put this morning behind us." She didn't look up. "Of course." The elevator doors closed behind him, and Sophia exhaled slowly. She looked down at what she had written. Not a tearful note or angry accusations, but a methodical list of tasks. Passport, secure accounts, lawyer, flight. She picked up her phone and called Imani. "Change of plans. Can you meet me now? And bring an overnight bag. I need a place to stay." 3 hours later, sitting in Imani's apartment with a cup of tea growing cold beside her, Sophia explained her plan. "You're just going to disappear?" Imani asked, concern etched across her face. "Sophia, he'll find you. Men like Victor don't let go of what they consider theirs." "He won't look," Sophia replied with certainty. His pride won't allow it. To the world, he'll paint me as unstable, ungrateful. He'll become the abandoned husband, garnering sympathy while quietly celebrating his freedom to pursue Camilla openly. She took a deep breath. And that's exactly what I'm counting on. What about divorce? You could get half of everything. Sophia shook her head. The prenup ensures I'd get almost nothing. Besides, this isn't about money. She looked out the window. At the Boston skyline, the Westfield Tower dominating the view. It's about becoming someone he can't control, someone he never saw coming. That afternoon, while Victor sat in his board meeting, Sophia Westfield methodically erased herself from their shared life. She took only what was truly hers: her father's watch, her mother's wedding ring, a few cherished books and clothes. Victor had deemed too plain for his wife. She left behind the jewelry he had given her, arranged precisely on her vanity-like museum pieces. On the kitchen counter, she placed her wedding ring atop a single sheet of paper. No explanations, no accusations. Just 2 words in her elegant handwriting: "Goodbye, Victor." By nightfall, as Victor entered the empty penthouse expecting to find her preparing for dinner, Sophia was already on a plane bound for Singapore. Her father's inheritance serving as the first building block of what would become her empire, and eventually, Victor's downfall. Rebirth. The humidity of Singapore wrapped around Sophia like a warm blanket as she stepped out of Changi Airport, carrying just 1 suitcase and a laptop bag. 3 connecting flights and 26 hours of travel had left her exhausted, but beneath the fatigue burned a quiet determination that hadn't dimmed since she walked out of her Boston penthouse. "Ms. Blackwood?" A woman with a crisp white shirt and a tablet approached her. "I'm Juniper Tan from Meridian Suites. Your accommodation is ready." Sophia nodded, following Juniper to a waiting car. She had reverted to her maiden name, not just legally but emotionally too. Sophia Blackwood felt both familiar and foreign, on her tongue after 7 years as Mrs. Westfield. The modest serviced apartment in the Tanjong Pagar district became her first real home in years. No marble countertops or crystal chandeliers, just functional furniture and a small balcony overlooking the bustling street below. She paid 6 months in advance, using a portion of her father's inheritance. That first night, sitting cross-legged on her new bed with local takeout and her laptop, she began researching. Financial news, market trends, emerging technologies, all. The topics she had once studied passionately before Victor had gradually convinced her that her ambitions were impractical distractions. A news alert popped up on her screen. Westfield Enterprises CEO Victor Westfield announces divorce. Wife taking time away for mental health. Attached was a photo of Victor looking appropriately somber at a press conference, Camilla noticeably absent. Sophia closed the tab without reading further. Victor's narrative didn't matter anymore. Her story was just beginning. 3 months later, Sophia sat across from Ren Tanaka, a veteran investment banker at Singapore's apex capital, watching as he reviewed her proposal. "This is ambitious," he said finally, removing his glasses. "Financial technology platforms aren't uncommon, Ms. Blackwood. But your approach to decentralized lending and microfinance for women entrepreneurs in emerging markets, it's innovative but extremely risky." "Risk is relative, Mr. Tanaka," Sophia replied. "I've spent the past 12 weeks meeting with women business owners across Southeast Asia. The traditional banking system has failed them, but they're driving local economies despite that obstacle. My platform removes the gatekeepers." "And your experience in this sector?" "Masters in Business Analytics from MIT, specializing in predictive modeling for financial systems." She met his gaze steadily. "And personal experience with how financial dependence becomes a cage." Ren studied her for a long moment. "Your initial investment is modest. I'm not seeking to build an empire overnight. I want sustainable growth, based on real impact." A smile crept across Ren's face. Most people come in here talking about becoming billionaires by 30. You talk about sustainability and impact. I can assure you, Mr. Tanaka, I intend to be profitable. But wealth without purpose is just decoration. She thought briefly of the diamonds Victor had draped her in, beautiful and cold. You'll need a new identity in the market, Ren said, surprising her. Not just a company name, but a personal brand. Singapore's financial world is traditional, dominated by old money and older names. Sophia considered this. What would you suggest? Something that represents transformation. Ren closed her proposal folder. I'm going to introduce you to some people. But first, who do you want to be in this new world you're building? That night. Sophia stood on her small balcony, watching the city lights flicker like stars fall into earth. Who did she want to be? Not Victor's shadow, not even Sophia Blackwood with all her old doubts and compromises. The next morning, she registered. Her company, Lumina Financial Technologies, and for herself, a name that would become both shield and sword in the years to come, Vivienne Gray. 18 months into her new life, Vivienne's small office in a co-working space had expanded to occupy an entire floor. Lumina's microfinance platform had launched in Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam, with plans to expand throughout Asia by year's end. The Jakarta partnership is confirmed, announced Prisha Mehta, Vivienne's operations director and first official hire. And the investor from London is waiting in the conference room. Vivienne nodded, reviewing the quarterly projections on her tablet. Tell Mr. Harrington I'll be there in 5 minutes. When she entered the conference room, she found not the elderly British banker she had expected, but a tall man with salt and pepper hair and keen eyes that assessed her with immediate interest. Ms. Gray, he extended his hand. Thomas Harrington, Obsidian Ventures. Your reputation precedes you. Curiously, Mr. Harrington, yours doesn't precede you, Vivienne replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I was expecting Philip. Harrington. My uncle, Thomas explained, taking a seat. He was impressed by your proposal but thought I might be better suited to evaluate its potential. We rarely invest outside Europe and North America, but Lumina's growth metrics are compelling. As Thomas outlined Obsidian's interest in funding Lumina's expansion, Vivienne listened carefully, noting the precision of his questions and his genuine curiosity about the women entrepreneurs her platform served. You're not just looking for returns, she observed when he finished. Neither are you, he countered. Your business model could be more profitable if you charged higher interest rates or focused on wealthier markets, yet you've chosen a more difficult path. The difficult path is often the most transformative. Thomas studied her for a moment. You're not what I expected, Ms. Gray. I rarely am these days, she replied. Their partnership was finalized within weeks, with Obsidian Ventures providing the capital Lumina needed to expand across Asia and eventually into African markets. What Thomas didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Vivienne had thoroughly researched Obsidian before their meeting and discovered they were one of the few investment firms not tied to Westfield Enterprises or its subsidiaries. Every move she made was deliberate, each partnership carefully vetted to ensure she remained invisible to her past while building toward a future where she would no longer need to hide. By the 3rd anniversary of her departure from Boston, Vivienne Gray had transformed from a startup founder into a rising force in international finance. Her dark hair now fell in sleek waves to her shoulders. Her wardrobe consisted of impeccably tailored suits in bold colors, and her soft voice had developed an edge of authority that commanded attention in boardrooms across Asia. Lumina had evolved, too, expanding beyond microfinance into a comprehensive financial technology ecosystem that served markets traditional banks ignored. The company's valuation had just crossed $1 billion, earning Vivienne her first mention in Forbes Asia as the quiet revolutionary of fintech. That evening, alone in her new penthouse overlooking Marina Bay, Vivienne opened a secure browser and typed Victor Westfield into the search bar. Articles about Westfield Enterprises' aggressive expansion into European markets appeared, alongside photos of Victor at galas with Camilla, now Mrs. Westfield, on his arm. One headline caught her attention: Westfield Enterprises faces regulatory scrutiny over acquisition strategy. Vivian smiled, closing her laptop. Victor had always been impatient, cutting corners when obstacles appeared. That impatience would be useful to her someday, but not yet. First, she needed to become someone he couldn't possibly ignore, someone with the power to take everything he valued. She picked up her phone and dialed Thomas Harrington. "It's time to discuss our next phase," she said when he answered. "I'm thinking of something bigger than Lumina, much bigger." "I'm listening," Thomas replied. "I want to create Nebula Innovations," Vivian said, looking out at the glittering Singapore skyline. "A global technology conglomerate that will change the rules of the game." What had begun as an escape had become a mission. And somewhere in the distance, though he didn't know it yet, Victor Westfield's empire had started its long, inevitable descent toward the woman he had once underestimated. The Tokyo skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Nebula Innovations' newest headquarters, a 70-story glass tower that seemed to touch the clouds. 5 years had passed since Vivian Gray had founded Lumina Financial Technologies in a small Singapore office. Now, at 35, she stood at the helm of a global conglomerate valued at $27 billion. "Quite the view," remarked Thomas Harrington, now Nebula's chief strategy officer and one of the few people who had witnessed Vivian's meteoric rise from the beginning. "Hard to believe this all started with microloans and a stubborn vision." Vivian smiled, her reflection in the glass a study in contrasts to the woman who had fled Boston years ago. Gone was the hesitation in her posture, the careful modulation of her voice. Her charcoal suit was impeccably tailored, her presence commanding, without effort. "Stubbornness has its uses," she replied, turning from the window to the holographic display dominating the conference room. It showed Nebula's expanding empire, Lumina Financial Technologies, now the leading fintech platform across Asia and Africa. Helios Energy Solutions, pioneering affordable renewable technology in developing markets. Quantum Defense Systems, specializing in cybersecurity, and their newest acquisition, Meridian Medical Technologies. "The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, Thomas reminded her. "Harrison Westwood is attending virtually from London." Vivian nodded, suppressing the slight tension that always accompanied any name resembling her former husband's. Harrison Westwood was one of Nebula's major investors, with no connection to Victor Westfield beyond the coincidental similarity of their surnames, a fact she had verified exhaustively before accepting his investment. "And the Meridian integration team is ready with their presentation?" "Yes, though Dr. Fujimoto has concerns about the timeline for merging the research divisions. Tell him I'll address his concerns personally after the meeting." Vivian gathered her tablet as her executive. Assistant Kenji appeared at the door. "Ms. Gray, I have the quarterly projections you requested," he said, handing her a secure tablet. "And Ms. Mehta is on line 3 regarding the São Paulo negotiations. Tell Prisha I'll call her back in an hour." Vivian scanned the projections, her mind already calculating adjustments to their expansion strategy. "And send flowers to Director Chen's wife. Their daughter just graduated from Stanford." Kenji nodded, making notes. "One more thing. Financial. Times is requesting an interview for their Women Reshaping Global Business special issue." Vivian paused. Media attention was a double-edged sword. She had maintained a carefully cultivated public image, accessible enough to build trust, but private enough to control her narrative. Each interview was strategically considered, each photograph approved with meticulous attention. "Send me their questions first," she decided. "And no personal history segments, just Nebula's vision and our impact metrics." As Kenji left, Thomas gave her a knowing look. "Still avoiding the origin story?" My past is irrelevant to Nebula's future, Vivian replied with finality. It was a principle she lived by, looking forward, never back. Except for the secure server in her private office that monitored Westfield Enterprises' every move, analyzing vulnerabilities, and tracking Victor's increasingly questionable business decisions. The boardroom filled with Nebula's leadership team. Brilliant. Minds Vivian had personally recruited from around the world, each drawn to her vision of technology that served humanity rather than exploiting it. They represented a carefully assembled family of sorts, bound by shared purpose rather than blood or obligation. As Vivian took her seat at the head of the table, the holographic display shifted to show Nebula's global operations, a constellation of innovation centers spanning 6 continents. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice commanding immediate attention. Today, we're not just reviewing quarterly performance, we're charting our course for the next decade. She gestured to the display. Phase 1 of Nebula's mission is complete. We've built the foundation. Now we begin Phase 2, integration and disruption. For the next hour, she outlined her vision with precision and passion, how Nebula would connect its seemingly disparate divisions into a unified ecosystem that would transform entire industries. The board listened, captivated by the clarity of her strategy and the boldness of her ambition. "Ms. Gray," said Harrison Westwood from the London video feed when she finished, "this is precisely why I invested in Nebula. You don't just see the future, you create it." After the meeting, Vivian retreated to her private office, a minimalist space with a single desk, a meditation corner, and walls lined with books. Unlike Victor's office, with its imposing mahogany and display cases of awards, Vivian's space reflected her belief that power needed no ornate signifiers. She activated the secure terminal embedded in her desk, entering a complex series of passwords. The screen illuminated with the latest data on Westfield Enterprises, stock prices, recent acquisitions, leadership changes. Victor had expanded aggressively into European markets, leveraging debt to finance acquisitions that projected confidence but created vulnerability. A news alert caught her attention. Westfield Enterprises announces major restructuring amid market pressures. The accompanying photo showed Victor at a press conference, his expression confident, but his eyes betraying tension. Beside him stood Camilla, now sporting a sleek bob and the hollow smile Vivian recognized all too well. The smile of a woman, realizing her cage was golden but locked nonetheless. Vivian closed the file and turned to the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching as Tokyo transitioned from day to night, office lights creating constellations across the cityscape. 7 years had passed since she had walked away from her life as Sophia Westfield. 7 years of reinvention, of building something that was entirely her own. Her private phone, the one only 5 people in the world had the number to, chimed with a message from Imani, now a professor at MIT and one of the few connections to her past that Vivian maintained. "Just saw VW on Bloomberg. Looks like trouble in paradise. Are you still watching?" Vivian typed back, "Always, but not ready yet." Imani's response came quickly. "Don't wait too long. Revenge gets cold." Vivian smiled slightly. Imani misunderstood her motives. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about creating a world where men like Victor couldn't destroy women like Sophia with impunity. Every company Nebula acquired, every market they transformed, was another step toward the moment when she would finally close the circle. Her desk phone buzzed. "Ms. Gray," Kenji's voice came through the speaker. "Your 4 p.m. with the Meridian research team is ready." "Thank you, Kenji. I'll be right there." As Vivian gathered her materials, her gaze fell on the small framed photograph hidden in her desk drawer, the only physical reminder of her former life. It showed a young woman with hopeful eyes standing before MIT's campus, graduation cap in hand. Sophia Blackwood before Victor, before the compromise, before the erasure. She closed the drawer decisively. That woman was gone, transformed into someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more dangerous to men who mistook kindness for weakness. That evening, as her private jet soared toward their Singapore headquarters, Vivian reviewed the latest acquisition proposals. Nebula's expansion continued at a calculated pace, each new company carefully selected not just for its financial potential, but for its strategic value in her larger design. Thomas forwarded this, Kenji said, handing her a tablet with a confidential dossier. Westfield Enterprises is seeking investors for their troubled Mediterranean resort development. They're approaching several Asian conglomerates through intermediaries. Vivian scanned the document, a familiar tightness forming in her chest. Who else has seen this? Just Thomas. He thought you'd want to know. She nodded, dismissing Kenji with a quiet thank you. When she was alone, Vivian opened her personal tablet and pulled up the secure files tracking Westfield's financial position. The picture was clearer now. Victor was overextended, his European expansion faltering, his cash reserves depleted. The Mediterranean project was meant to be his crowning achievement, a luxury resort empire that would establish Westfield as a global lifestyle brand. Now it was becoming his Achilles heel. Vivian drafted a message to Thomas. Create shell company. Asahi Global Ventures. Japanese credentials untraceable to Nebula. Express interest in Westfield Mediterranean through third-party intermediaries. The response came minutes later. Dangerous game. Are you sure it's time? Vivian looked out. The plain window at the darkness below, punctuated by the lights of cities and villages. People living their lives, unaware of the corporate chess match playing out above them. Not the end game, she replied. Just the opening move. As the plane descended toward Singapore, Vivian closed her eyes, allowing herself a rare moment of reflection. In the 7 years since she had disappeared from Boston, she had built something Victor could never imagine. Not just wealth or power, but purpose. Nebula's technologies were changing lives across the developing world, creating opportunities for those the traditional systems had failed. That would be her true legacy, long after Victor Westfield became a footnote in her story. But first, she would complete the circle. Not for revenge, but for the quiet woman who had once believed herself powerless, and for all the other women, still trapped in golden cages of others' making. The wheels touched down on Singaporean soil, and Vivian Gray opened her eyes, ready for the next phase of her ascension. The pieces were moving into place. Victor's empire was beginning to crumble from within, and soon she would step from the shadows into the light, reclaiming not just her power, but her truth. The woman he had discarded was returning, not as his wife, but as his reckoning. Shadows. Asahi Global Ventures appreciates Mr. Westfield's presentation, Vivian said in flawless Japanese, her voice altered by the subtle modulator hidden in her collar. The virtual meeting screen showed her as Hanako Tanaka, a fabricated Japanese investment director with digitally altered features. On the screen, Victor Westfield nodded confidently, unaware he was pitching to the woman he had once controlled. The Mediterranean Resort Collection will revolutionize luxury tourism. We simply need bridging capital until regulatory approvals finalize. Your recent European ventures have faced challenges, Vivian noted, watching Victor's expression tighten almost imperceptibly. Minor setbacks, Victor dismissed with practiced ease. Nothing that concerns our core business. Lies. Vivian had the real numbers. Westfield Enterprises was hemorrhaging money with 3 failed acquisitions and mounting debt. The Mediterranean project was his last gamble. We'll require complete financial disclosure before proceeding, she said. knowing such transparency would reveal his precarious position. After the call, Thomas found Vivian in her Singapore office. He's desperate, taking meetings with anyone, offering cash. "How long until it becomes public?" she asked. 3 months, maybe 4 before he can't hide the losses anymore. Vivian nodded, fingers tracing the edge of her desk. "Have we secured the position in Westfield's main creditor? Bank?" "Nebula now owns 15% of First Atlantic, enough influence for what you're planning." That night, alone in her penthouse, Vivian opened a sealed envelope delivered by private courier. Inside was an invitation to the Westfield Foundation. "Gala in Boston, Victor's annual display of philanthropic theater designed to burnish his reputation among the elite." "The final stage begins," she whispered, placing the invitation on her desk. After 7 years of calculated moves in the shadows, Vivian Gray was ready to step into the light, directly into Victor Westfield's line of sight.